Hello and welcome into the backfield. I'm your host Connor Schaff, and today I will be going over my Week 12 college football top 25 committee ranking projections. That was a mouthful, but this week of college football, I gotta be honest with you, I came into it not really expecting too much. There weren't a lot of games on the schedule that really stood out as games that I was like, yes, that is a game I think has the potential to be an upset, has potential to shock us, give us a crazy game. But turns out I am not a very smart human being, because this week was unbelievable. So I don't want to dilly-dally too much. I want to get right into the meat and bones of it. But before we do, I do want to go through the college football selection committee criteria once again. I'm not going to read through this entire thing because I did in the last video. It also is in the description if you do ever want to take a look at that. But one thing I do want to note that I found interesting based on last week's ranking is that compared to how the committee made it seem, where it was going to be about 75% statistical data and 25% eye test, it honestly seems like a 50-50 split, much closer to what we've had in years past. They've definitely used statistical data in situations, but they also used the eye test quite a lot. Look at where Oregon was ranked. Look at where Notre Dame was ranked. Look at the fact that the two Big Ten schools are ranked at Texas A&M, but despite the fact that Texas A&M has the number one strength of schedule. Now, I can't say I disagree with too many of those rankings. It's simply that isn't shown by statistical data. That means that they did quite heavily use the eye test. And that's okay. I just wish that the committee would make that a little bit more clear through their criteria. But if you weren't here in the last video, how we do these rankings is the same way as how the selection committee does the rankings to an extent. The committee, when making their rankings, first makes a short list of every single team in deliberation to be ranked that has a possibility of being ranked in the top 25, and then they narrow down that short list to 25 teams. So that is what we're going to do. I'm going to go through every single team that contends to be ranked, and then we'll narrow down the top 25 for you. And we will start with the American Conference, where we have Memphis, North Texas, South Florida, and Tulane. Memphis took the L against Tulane this past week. A bit of a poor loss from them, especially when they were at home. But because of that, Tulane does move into the conversation. Navy was in the conversation here last week, but after their beatdown from Notre Dame, they are now no longer in consideration for me as a two-loss team. We also have North Texas at only one loss, and then South Florida still cruising along with only two losses. They are, in my opinion, the best group of five team at the moment. And I will go ahead and spoil it for you now. Because the committee seems to not rate the group of five at all, I don't have any group of five teams ranked. I am recording this video before San Diego State plays their game because I'm not staying up until 3 in the morning to watch a Mountain West game between San Diego State and Hawaii. As exciting as that sounds, I have to get up in the morning, so I would rather not. But I hope you guys can understand. I do have South Florida as the highest ranked group of five team at the moment. I think the committee will as well. Despite their loss to Memphis, I think that being on the road only by 3 points, and also still having the wins over Florida and Boise State and North Texas for that matter, will get them over the line. Moving on to the ACC though, where we actually have a new team joining the conversation, and that is Wake Forest. Wake Forest take down Virginia this week in a crazy game. Obviously, Virginia's starting quarterback gets injured, so you do have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but you just still have to give it Wake Forest their plaudits at 6-3. We also have Louisville, who lost to Cal this past week. Cal, I think, are one of the better 4-loss teams in the country, if I'm being honest. I think that is a very good football team that, for whatever reason, lost 34-0 to San Diego State, so aren't in any top 25 discussion. But I do think Louisville will still be ranked. Georgia Tech are up here now as the only one-loss team in the ACC. SMU are still here, Miami are still here, and Pitt is still here. We now move on to the Big 12 that sees no changes. Obviously, BYU with the absolute thumping by Texas Tech this week. Not even a close game. Honestly, about what I expected, to be honest. I really did not think that BYU had what it takes to compete with this Texas Tech team. But we also have Houston, Arizona State, Cincinnati, and Utah in the conversation. Next up with the Big Ten, we have 9 teams in the conversation. That is Indiana, Illinois, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Iowa, Nebraska, Washington, and Michigan. Now, this is technically no different to what we had last week, but there are quite a lot of shakeups after Washington with an awful loss to Wisconsin in Wisconsin. They are going to fall out of the committee's top 25, and really what they're holding their head high on now is their win over Illinois. In addition to that, Iowa does lose to Oregon, but I do still think Iowa will at least be in the conversation. And Nebraska are currently up by 3 touchdowns over UCLA. I haven't waited until the end of that game, but given it is a 3-score game midway through the third quarter, I think that Nebraska has it covered. Moving on to the SEC, we also have 9 teams in the conversation, and that is Texas, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and Missouri. LSU officially falls out of contention to be ranked, and nobody replaces them. I did forget to add Oklahoma to the graphic last week, so it does look like there's the same number of teams on the graphic. But obviously, we have Missouri losing to Texas A&M this past week. Everybody else gets the job done. Vanderbilt did keep it close. Ole Miss really kept it close, playing an elite team in the Citadel. Alabama got the job done against LSU. Georgia got the job done against Mississippi State, and so on. And then we have our others. Notre Dame is still up there from the independent region. No idea what that means, but Notre Dame, please join a conference. Pretty please. James Madison, they are also still a one-loss team, and I think that they are the other team. I really think that there are 3 teams that have a chance to be ranked out of the group of 5 this week. That's South Florida, North Texas, and James Madison. I think the problem with North Texas is that they have a head-to-head loss to South Florida, and it's a home game for North Texas where they lost by 30 points. James Madison definitely has the best loss, losing to Louisville, but they just don't have any impressive wins on the resume, and honestly, they don't have a single Power 4 win, period. At least San Diego State does have a Power 4 win, but instead they have a loss to Washington State, who North Texas beat by 40 points. So I think that if you had a ranking, North Texas would still be ahead of San Diego State at the moment. And as I mentioned before, South Florida would be ahead of North Texas. But those are all the teams in the conversation to be ranked. That is a total of 38 teams that I think are in the conversation to be ranked. But these are the top 25 teams from that, starting with what I like to consider 3-loss team row, where we obviously saw Tennessee ranked last week at number 25. My gosh, I got so much hate on Twitter for saying that Tennessee is going to be ranked, and what a surprise, they are ranked despite having 3 losses. You know why I knew they were going to be ranked is because it's the SEC, and their 3 losses are 3 great losses. I find it a bit redundant, the idea that quality losses shouldn't matter. 100% quality losses should matter. Why should Tennessee be punished for playing a much more difficult schedule than some of the other teams around them? Now, would I rank Tennessee if it was my rankings? Probably not. I think that the committee is way too harsh on the group of 5. I would, instead of these 3 6-3 teams, have at number 23 South Florida, number 24, North Texas, and number 25, James Madison. Honestly, I would drop out Pittsburgh too and get in San Diego State in there as well. But the College Football Playoff Committee rankings are not up to me. They're up to 13 guys that are incredibly biased towards their schools, and we have to live with that fact. But, so I do think that Tennessee is going to be ranked. They are going to move up to 23 just because of teams like Washington, and Washington is falling out. I'm trying to think who else is falling out. I know at least one other team does, but I cannot remember off the top of my head. Let's see if I can. I'll just go ahead and pull up the rankings to figure that one out. But Iowa, I think despite losing to Oregon, will still be ranked. They do definitely have the worst loss than Tennessee does, having lost to Iowa State. But I think that you have to look at how well they played Oregon and Indiana, and they should still be ranked. And I think Arizona State should be ranked. They have some pretty bad losses, but they also have a win over Texas Tech, which just looks better by the week. And I think that deserves a ton of plaudits. Okay, obviously Missouri is also dropping out of the top 25. That was the other one I had to remember. And the other team moving into the top 25 is Houston, who maybe to some surprise is not only moving ahead of last week's ranked Tennessee, but also last week's ranked Pittsburgh. And honestly, I kind of just think the committee is going to realize they're a little dumb for ranking Pittsburgh ahead of Houston in the first place. They are both 2-loss teams, funnily enough, with the same loss to West Virginia. Then their other losses are Houston to Texas Tech and Pittsburgh to Louisville. I think Houston will end up being ahead just because the Big 12 looks like so much better of the conference than the ACC at this point. So I do think that Houston will end up moving all the way from not being ranked to 21 at an 8-2 record. We'll now move on to 16 through 20, and this is one of the ones that I'm a little conflicted about. I have Michigan ranked here at 20, Miami at 19, Louisville at 18, Virginia at 17, and USC at 16. USC moves up from 19 to 16 after the ACC teams lose. Michigan, I debated also moving up, but I feel like the problem for Michigan is just that neither of their losses they played close at all, and they have no impressive wins on their resume if Washington doesn't look like a good team. So I just don't know what to do with Michigan at this point. I definitely think that they are ahead of the pack of Houston and Pittsburgh, but I struggle to think that they'll put them ahead of a Miami team that has a win over Notre Dame. And then obviously Louisville has a win over Miami and Virginia over Louisville. So to keep some sort of consistency about head-to-head record when they all have 2 losses, I think that it'll be Virginia 17, Louisville 18, Miami 19, and Michigan at 20. We'll move on to 11 through 15 though, where Georgia Tech now becomes the highest ranked ACC team once again as they move up to 15. Still an abysmal ranking to be the highest ranked ACC team, but they didn't play this week, so they did not have the chance to lose and also drop down the rankings. I do actually think that Georgia Tech is probably the best team in the ACC. I would honestly keep an eye out for SMU. I think that team has all the tools to go back to back and win the ACC again. But I definitely think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Unless maybe, I think it's an interesting conversation to have, and I'll talk about it a bit more in the college football playoff projection video that will be coming out tomorrow or today if this video ends up getting uploaded past midnight, which it probably will be. I'll talk a bit about what will happen if Duke ends up somehow winning the ACC at 4 losses. They probably still would be in the playoffs, but if South Florida has 2 losses as the American champ, San Diego State has 1 loss as the Mountain West champ, and James Madison has 1 loss as the Sun Belt champ, then can you really put a 4-loss Duke that also has a loss to Tulane and UConn in the college football playoffs? I just don't think so, but we'll see. Then at number 14, we have Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, they struggled a little bit this past week against Auburn. They had to go to overtime to get the job done. But I would kind of chalk it up to Auburn having a new coach honeymoon. I think that this Vanderbilt team is still very much in the conversation to make the playoffs. And honestly, with all these ACC teams losing, they are in a great spot. They really need to get their win over Tennessee to jump Utah in the rankings, and I think they would with a win over Tennessee. But they will need to get that done. I also want to say that they play... No, so they just play Kentucky and Tennessee. So it is just as long as they win out, they are probably in the college football playoffs. At number 13, we have Utah. They just stay in the same spot. Obviously still behind BYU despite them losing because BYU has the head-to-head record win. So obviously BYU does lose, but it's not the end of the world because they do still have a capped floor by the fact that they have the win over Utah. Oklahoma just moves up to 11. They don't play, but because BYU drops, they move up. Now at number 10, we have Texas. It's the same thing. Because BYU dropped, they move up. They didn't play. Notre Dame thrashes Navy this past week. Not too surprising, but because the committee has them so high, I think they are almost locked into a playoff spot at this point. Now, it very much comes down to the fact they play Pittsburgh next week in what will be a ridiculous game. And if Pittsburgh wins that game, all of a sudden they are a college football playoff contender in their own right, and Notre Dame would be completely out of the race. But if Notre Dame gets through that game, they will be in the college football playoffs. Oregon, I debated moving them down behind Notre Dame, but I decided to keep Oregon ranked here at 8. I think the committee likes how Oregon looks. I don't think they'll like how they played this past week, but clearly the committee rates Iowa as a team. So I think that they are going to appreciate Oregon going to Iowa and winning that game, even if it was in not so good fashion. Texas Tech is up here at 7 now. Honestly, I want to move them even higher. I just don't think the committee would. I honestly think they deserve to be in the top 5 right now, but I think that 7 is probably where they will be ranked. Ole Miss is here at 6. They played a very difficult team in the Citadel this past week, and honestly, I was shocked to see them get past that game unscathed, but they did manage to do that, and they stay here at 6 because of it. And then in the top 5, we have one big change. I'm sure you can notice it already. It has nothing to do with Georgia, who got the job done against Mississippi State. Nothing to do with Alabama, who got the job done against LSU. It is that I have Texas A&M moving ahead of Indiana. I think that with the way that Texas A&M performed at Missouri, winning 38-17, while Indiana heavily struggled to beat Penn State, and it took a last-minute miracle play touchdown to win the game. I think that Texas A&M will officially move ahead of Indiana. I think Ohio State will stay at 1, though, as they took down Purdue in comfortable fashion this past week, but that might as well be a bye week for them. So that is all I have for you today. Make sure to let me know your rankings down below in which you project the College Football Committee will do. Make sure to like and subscribe, interact with the video in any way you can. It all helps grow the channel. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to stay tuned for the college football playoff projection that I will be releasing Sunday morning. But I hope you all have a great rest of your night and have a good one. Bye.